Howdy, folks. Welcome to another episode of The Inciting Incident. I'm still your host, Tim Shields. I had a lot of people reach out about the last podcast with Forrest Wilson. If you missed that one, I highly suggest you tune in. It's a profound story. I'd also kindly ask that if you like this content, please like, subscribe, share, give a rating, etc. I hate to be a beggar, but it really helps get the word out. And let's be honest, it's tough to fight the algorithm these days. It would also probably help with my book deal, which there might be a hiccup or two there, but that's a whole nother story for another time. So here's a question for you. How does someone holding a PhD in cognitive psychology and postdoctorate training from Columbia become an intuitive counselor and spiritual coach? If you heard episode 5 with Dr. Tara Delaberto, she also went from the Ivy Leagues to a spiritual awakening. It seems to be a trend. So with that said, my next guest is Dr. Victoria Shaw. Dr. Victoria Shaw is an intuitive counselor, author, and spiritual coach who integrates academic rigor with intuitive knowing. Holding a PhD in cognitive psychology from Princeton University and a postdoctoral training in educational psychology from Columbia, she spent years studying how the human mind learns and grows before realizing that true transformation begins in the soul. Bingo, hello. Today, Victoria helps clients from around the world reconnect with their inner guidance and align with their highest potential. Through her private practice, teaching, and her acclaimed podcast, Intuitive Connection, she invites people to bridge reason and intuition, to live from the deeper intelligence that unites science, spirit, self, and mysticism. Dr. Victoria, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm excited for this conversation.
Yeah, me too. I always start, this conversation with the listeners with the same question, which is, who were you, where were you, and did you have any idea what you wanted to do with your life when you were 17 years old?
17. Oh, I was going back further. When I was 17 years old, I wanted to be a neuropsychologist, believe it or not. And I was really drawn to the work of like Oliver Sacks. I kind of wanted to be him when I grew up. I wanted to write about the mind and the brain and the relationship between those two things and how people understand the world. And I wanted to write popular psychology books and study the brain. So that's where I was heading when I was 17. Does that answer the question?
Yeah.
I was really clear about it too, which is kind of funny for a 17-year-old.
Yeah. Where did you grow up and where did that come from?
So I grew up in Michigan, outside of Detroit, and I was blessed to go to a really alternative school all the way K through 12, where they really gave me free rein, I think, to kind of explore my passions. And I'm so grateful for that, because not a lot of us have that in our schooling, and I really did, and I had so much support. And then my interest in the brain actually came around 7th or 8th grade. I was diagnosed with having attention deficit disorder, which is what it was called back then, and started taking medication, which I know is not something that everyone is on board with, but for me, it was life-changing. It was absolutely life-changing. I was already kind of in a school for smart kids, but I did not feel like one of the smart kids. And I was really just overwhelmed and struggling socially, academically. Like I was all over the place. And I realize now a lot of it was just because I had such a chaotic home life, but nonetheless, taking that medication changed my life. It absolutely changed my life. I went from the bottom of the class in 7th grade to the top of the class, started hanging out with the popular kids, at least for a short period of time. And so it was like this real game changer. And so it got me really interested in this relationship between the mind and the body and the brain. Cause I was like, wow, like taking this pill can change your life. What's that all about? And that's actually what got me really interested in the brain. Now I think about everything very differently now than I did then, but that's what sparked my passion.
Yeah. So what was kind of the chaos in the home? Because that tends to set the trajectory for the rest of our life and what we're battling to overcome these unconscious programs. I got a silly suspicion.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah. I mean, both my parents have crossed over, so I'm a little bit more open to share my story. I wasn't before because, they have their own opinions and I respect that. But my mom, I think was probably mentally ill, but not diagnosed with anything, but just not not super related to the 3D in a helpful way in terms of raising me. And so I felt very unsupported. My parents were also kind of in their own zone and doing their own thing. And I was an only child. So I like to say, for those of us who grew up in the 70s, we were all kind of free range children relative to the way children are raised now. But I was extra free range. So borderline neglected. So I just didn't really have a very like pure, clean, healthy worldview, because the people in my world, particularly my mom, who was a dominant force, viewed things very strangely. And I also just didn't feel really supported because, you know, they were too busy with their own stuff to show up for me. But school was my refuge. And like I said, I had an amazing experience at my school with some of just such loving teachers, such a loving community. And also a freedom to kind of just explore and be myself, which is just not something we usually get in that setting. And so I'm so grateful that, you know, my parents made that decision to send me where they sent me. And that's, I think, where I really, you know, explored and discovered, you know, these aspects of myself that I still use today.
Yeah. So you go to Princeton, postdoctorate work at Columbia. Do you start a traditional practice?
So, yes. So I did the academic thing, pretty much all in, you know, by the time I was 17, 18, I was a pretty high achieving girl, and, finished my undergrad, and I had gotten out of the neuro part because the school that I went to, only did research with animals, and I had worked in a biochemistry lab in high school, and I just couldn't do that work. Not that I'm against it necessarily, but I could not do it anymore. So I gravitated to the psychology, but my love it's still, even to this day, the brain is I love that work. But anyway, so I had gone over to psychology. I was like toying between going to graduate school. I was a double major in psychology and philosophy. And keep in mind at this point, Tim, I had zero spiritual background. My dad was an atheist. And he was the kind of atheist that thought if you believed in anything spiritual, you must be stupid. So not a lot of like
the worst kind.
Yeah. You know, towards the end of his life, I wouldn't say he was spiritual, but he was so sweet. He would say to me, you know, he would listen to my podcast and he'd be like, I don't understand what you're doing, but I know it's something good. And so that was, you know, that was very high praise from him.
Yeah.
And, you know, I found more and more as I came into my own. My dad was very supportive. He didn't understand it, but he's like, if it makes you happy, it's the right thing. And then my mom, God knows, she was all over the place. And so I didn't really have any kind of spiritual background. So for me, my spirituality really came through philosophy. Right. And, you know, I know now in high school and probably even beyond, I was a channeler, and a lot of the papers I wrote were channeled. I didn't know what that was, you know, like, yeah. You know, I was just doing this thing and people were like, oh my God, that's brilliant. But looking back now, I know that I was using my intuition and a lot of what I was doing was channeling. But so I was in college and I was kind of between being a psychologist and a philosopher because I really liked both. But I got into a better school with more money in psychology. So, you know, Princeton gave me the better deal. So I took it. And, all right, where was your question? Sorry.
Well, no, I mean, we're just riffing
right,
here.
Good deal.
It's interesting because I had this like dream in high school and it was like really shook me up. So I went to like my psychology professor and, you know, later realized it was an out of control dream. But I went into college thinking I was going to do psychology. Didn't really like it. Went to English. Didn't really like writing English papers. And then I became a philosophy and writing major.
Ah.
Yeah. So we have that same track.
Yeah.
And as far as channeling, you know, I call in my new book, instead of channeling, code breaking, because I was running along the beach one day in Oregon and my mission statement dropped in. I translate light, frequency, and energy into stories so as to lead others to their truth. So I'm just curious, when you are in that space of channeling, you know, I'm sure everybody experiences it differently. I'm curious how you experience it.
So back in the day,
let's go to writing. Well, actually go anywhere you want.
Yeah. So back in the day, the best example I can say when I was sitting in philosophy class. And so I was a psych major first and I wanted to design my own major. But when I went to my professors and asked them to sponsor me to design my own major, they pointed out I'd already completed the psychology major. And so I should just do that. So
real supportive.
Yeah, that by default became my major. And then I picked up a philosophy major as well, because I missed writing and thinking, and psychology was just research and it was really fun, but it was easy. And philosophy, stretched my mind. So I would be sitting in philosophy class and, we'd be discussing something and I would have the experience of going to the place beyond words. Right. And just going to the place beyond words, getting my answer. I could feel the answer. I could get what was that thing that was coming through. And then I would bring it back over the line and verbalize it. And my sweet professor at the time, Ken Taylor, who, he's crossed over now, but he was a podcaster, from Stanford, where he ended up at the end of his career. He was so supportive because he would literally go Victoria, you're getting that look on your face. That means something good is coming. What's coming? And so it was very encouraging for me to do this thing I was doing, yeah. He would see it and he'd be like, oh, I know she's got something good. So again, I had a lot of encouragement and support, but I realize now that going to the place beyond words, which was such a sweet spot and a joy for me, was channeling, right? We receive the energy, the information, and then we have to channel it into this conceptual form. So,
I love that. I mean, I know I've noticed when I'm writing, I kind of cock my head and it's almost I'm almost drooling and I'm listening to this voice. And a little while ago, somebody asked me well, where does the information come through? How do you feel? Is it your heart, whatever? And I'm well, when I'm writing, it comes through, I turn my head to the right because it's coming through the left side of the brain. Right. Which is the organized, linear. So it's this very organized control stream of information. But then if I'm out in nature or something, there is this torrent that comes through the right side of my brain. And I'm just scribbling everything I can as fast as I can to get it down. I'm always curious how people experience it.
Yeah.
So, I could go in a lot of different directions, but I'm going to start with something you said on your website. You said the tipping point for me was when my children started to struggle, and I realized that my unresolved personal issues were getting in the way of my being the kind of supportive and effective parent that my soul so deeply longed to be for them. So what was going on there?
So, I'm going to just catch you up on the journey. So I graduated from Princeton, got my PhD, was already thinking maybe this isn't what I want to do because I came in with these big philosophical questions. And at that point, the academic container of psychology, it's changing now. But at that point, they weren't hitting those big questions. They were hitting the easiest thing that you could do with undergraduates in the lab and get published. And I wanted to know what's consciousness and what's the relationship between our mind and the brain. And my research was super interesting and super relevant now. I was looking at reasoning and how people reason about the world and belief biases in reasoning, which is super relevant today. So, check out my first published research from 30 years ago because it's relevant, but it wasn't speaking to my soul. Not that I knew I had one at that point. And I went and did the postdoc because I didn't know what else I was going to do. And it was about midway through my postdoc that I just was like, this isn't for me. This isn't what I want. I'm at this really high level. If I keep doing at this high level, I mean, you got to give your mind, body, and the soul I didn't know I had to be successful. And I was like, and my passion's gone. I can't do this thing if I'm not passionate about it. So I took some time off and I started doing some writing, which was my other passion at the time, and wrote a couple books. And I also said this would be a really great time to start my family because I don't know what else I want to do. And I had just gotten married. And so I had my first child, published my first couple of books, had my second child, and felt really overwhelmed, just really overwhelmed. I just didn't, mothering felt very natural to me, but just managing all the details of life. And, what happens too when we have kids, a lot of times is, and I work a lot with parents. That was actually the first thing that I did when I started my practice was intuitive parent consulting. you have a couple of different people or beings or energies in the room, right? You have yourself, your parent self, you have your children, and then you also have your inner child. And, our inner child's always with us, right? All that unresolved stuff from our childhood, and just all the bits of our childhood self that didn't get processed. And some of them are really fantastic and joyous. And some of them are, they're still struggling. And, our kids will trigger the parts of ourselves that are still struggling. We see our kids and it reminds us and it brings those pieces out. And that's what was happening for me. And I didn't really know how to navigate. And, but I knew that, being a parent was central to who I wanted, to my journey in this lifetime. Like, I knew it was important. I knew I wanted to get it right. I didn't even have the insight at that point that it hadn't been gotten right for me because I was so aligned, with how my parents, particularly my mom, needed to see things, that I hadn't even unpacked what a hot mess my childhood was. But I knew this isn't how I wanted to show up. So I did the work. And I started to get support. And I was fortunate to have been connected to this really out of the box pediatrician in New York City who started sending me, even just for my kids, to all these wacky people like acupuncturists. I mean, that was weird to me. And then energy healers and medical intuitives. And it opened up this whole world that I didn't know existed, and it changed my life.
Was it, well, first of all, I just want to point out that that is a very disturbing realization when you are on the path, what you think is the path, and then you're like, this doesn't make sense to me anymore.
Yeah.
That's a big internal shakeup. Yeah. So were all of these alternative connections, what's the word? Was it a slow ladder, or was there an awakening moment?
I would say the slow ladder. Mm-hmm. For sure. Like little bits and pieces of, this isn't really working for me. This isn't what I want to do. This is how I want to show up in the world. Oh, look, there's this, like the whole intuition thing. Like at first I remember I went to this acupuncturist that the doctor sent me to, and he's like, stick out your tongue. And then he tells me all of this stuff about myself. It's like wild. I'm like, you got all that from my tongue, right? What is that? And he starts laughing, and he hands me Carolyn Maisa's book, and he's like, no, this is what I do. And I never got through that book. God bless her. But, like he obviously was a medical intuitive, right? But it took me a while to kind of like process all of this and understand what was going on. And then also make that connection between the fact that I'd been doing this my whole life. I was the kid that at 7, people would be like, that's so insightful for a 7-year-old, right? I was hearing my guidance. I was channeling. This is what I do. I had a very active imaginary life as a child, and I realized as a child, I was talking to my guides, like they were with me all the time. And, and we all do that to some degree. But it was just very loud for me, throughout my life. I just didn't know what it was. I was using it all the time, but I didn't know it was a thing. And I think once I identified, oh, this is my intuition. Oh, this is a good thing. Oh, this is my gift. Oh, this is the thing I was supposed to be doing for humanity, right? Like then everything lined up and ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching. Like I just soared. But it just took me a while to line up all those pieces and get ready to, the runway.
So how do you transition from what you were doing, which was somewhat traditional, to taking the next leap of faith?
Right. Well, I mean, like I said, I took a hard stop. I left academia. I was never going to be a clinical psychologist. So it was always in the back of my mind that maybe I want to work with people and maybe that would be fun. Like it was looping in my mind for many years. But again, I was very influenced by my family who would not have thought that was a good thing. I think my mom had all the skeletons in her closet. Like she didn't want me to like look at those. And my dad just thought everything like that was stupid. So, you know what I mean? Like, so
it's a lot to be up against.
I know, exactly. And I was young. And so like, I kept getting the nudge, but I just wasn't ready to go there. But it was loud. When I look back, I'm like, that should have been obvious. So I took some time off and I raised the kids, and I think that really helped. And it was when my kids, We lived in New York City for 12 years, and then we moved to Connecticut, which was just a much better. I'm a rural, like not really rural, but like I'm a country girl. I need like suburbs. I need quiet. I need nature. So New York was probably the hardest place I ever lived. It was fun.
Same for me.
I'm glad I did it.
Yeah.
But I remember when I left, I was just, thank you, New York, for all that you've given me and all the ways that I've grown. I can't believe I survived this. I'm so proud of myself. Sayonara. And then, when I was in Connecticut, it just, when my nervous system readjusted to a little bit more peace and calm, and I deepened my meditation practice, my intuition it exploded. I mean, it was really, really quick and really, really fast. And so I think the pause really helped me make that transition. And then also there's divine timing. Like I was ready, and my kids were a little bit older. So, I had a little more space again for myself. Sometimes when you have like little kids, and my ex-husband, or my husband at the time, he's now my ex-husband, but he was, his career was going to be the dominant career. We kind of made that decision together when I left mine. And so he was all in that and pretty high achieving. So I was really buried in childcare for those first couple of years. And then, I had a little more time to myself, and I just started following the intuitive nudges. I started working intentionally on developing my intuition, and then it just guided me. I went back and because I didn't feel that I had, enough education. I went back and I picked up a master's of counseling because I wanted those clinical skills. So I have those too. And then, that gave me the vehicle too, to develop both the clinical practice, because I needed to get licensed and you need so many hours, but also I did the intuitive work, pretty much those two things in parallel, until they stopped being in parallel because they just blended so beautifully. And, by the time I left Connecticut, which was about 4.5 years ago, the majority of my clientele came to me, for both things kind of combined.
Yeah. In my, my new book, I say that, I think that intuition leads us to the calling. And I think one of the biggest sources of anxiety and depression and everything else in society is that people aren't listening to their calling. They're not listening to their intuition. So, you say everybody has access to spirit guides. For those who are skeptical or just unsure, how can they begin to recognize their presence? How do you connect into that stream of information?
Right. And you don't even have to talk about spirit guides if you don't wanna. For me at the beginning, that was my hard line of I talk about intuition and, teach about intuition. But spirit guides was like crossing over into woo. So I'd be like really careful who I'd share that with. Now I'm just, freak flag is flying.
Yeah.
But we all have, the way that I see it is we're all spiritual beings having a human experience. And when you come in, and when you come into this human experience, up until now, I think it's going to be shifting, but we make this agreement to get fully acculturated into this 3D human world. And so we learn who we are and how the world works and what our place in the world is from others. And that becomes our reality. That becomes our dominant reality. Many of us too have learned to distrust our intuition, which is the part of you that hasn't forgotten who and what you really are. That is, like, I like to think of it as your direct line to your soul, spirit, source, higher self. We all have it. It never goes away. Just many of us have been conditioned and taught to go like this and like that.
Yeah.
But it's there. Like I gave the example, when I was in my late 20s, and even in grad school towards the end, when I was questioning, I had this thought I could have gone back and done what's called a clinical respecialization instead of a postdoc, 3 years. And I could have been a clinical psychologist. And, I was feeling that call. I was checking it out when I was at Columbia. I taught some kids I was taught graduate school, and I taught some of the students in the clinical program, and I was curious and I was asking them questions, and I sat in on some classes, but you know what I mean? The timing wasn't ready. I wasn't ready, but the whispers are always there, and we hear them when we need to hear them. And then back to your question, right? About how do we start to tune in? The first step is to set the intention. Intention is really powerful, right? What we focus on grows. And when you set an intention, you're basically like telling your higher self, source, guides, the universe, however you want to do it. This is what I want. This is where I want to go. And it will line right up to give you that. So the first step is just to set the intention. I want to hear my intuition more. And just by doing that, the opportunities to do so and the ones that are uniquely suited for you will arrive.
Yeah.
And then, the next thing is to start paying attention to how it's already happening for you, because it is. It is. And again, what we focus on grows. And so when you start to notice where your intuition is, sometimes I invite people to do some journaling, look back. Usually all the really good things that happened to you in your life, that was your intuition guiding you. So you can start there. But we all have experiences where you know something and you don't know how you know it, and it's right. And that's your intuition at work.
I mean, it's a feeling, right? Because people are just like, I just had this feeling, so I took a right instead of a left or something like that.
It can be a gut feeling, a kinesthetic knowing, a full body knowing. You just know that you know, and you just know. It can be, that wise voice in your head. Ooh, maybe you should go call so-and-so, right? It can be, some people have dreams, they get guidance in dreams, or they have visions, right? So there's so many different ways that our intuition works for us. Some people do it through writing, right? But it's just sort of whenever you're in the flow, wherever those places in your life where things, the real magic that happens to you, the synchronicity, and sometimes too, it's the time when you didn't listen, right? You just get off the highway here. Just take this exit today. Yeah. And you didn't. And then boom, there was a huge accident in front of you and you were stuck for an extra 30, 40 minutes. And you're like, damn, I should have listened. Those are my favorite moments, oddly enough, because that's when you really know your intuition was working. So you just kind of reflect on where it's already happening for you. Okay. And anything that you think is your intuition, start there. So maybe you're wrong, whatever. It's trial and error. And so that's really the first step in kind of making that reconnection, that intention, giving yourself permission, paying attention, seeing how it's already working for you. And then the next step is, that we have to learn that art of discernment. And this is where a lot of people get stuck, right? How do I know what's my intuition and what's my mind?
Great point.
Yeah. And the short answer is you don't know with your mind what's your intuition and what's your mind. So if you're trying to figure it out, you're just going to spin and loop because your mind is not made to make that determination. So when you know, and and again, now I know what it feels like. I know what it sounds like. I've been doing this for so long. I'm pretty clear most of the time. And if I'm not clear, then I just let it go. And I know that it'll come back to me and I'll get more clarification. But some short little hacks for knowing the difference is your intuition. First of all, it's always calm. It's always emotionally neutral. It's always loving. I say if the voice in your head is unkind, it's your mind. It's your mind. That's your conditioning. Your intuition comes from source, soul, your higher self, your guides. They exist in a place of unconditional love. Anything that's not that is not coming from there. It's coming from your mind. So that's a good one. Yeah. Yes. You have a question.
Well, I just was, I was thinking about my own work, and sort of when I was 17, I decided I wanted to be a writer. And that's kind of what this whole new book, Dream Tethering, is about. It's like shooting that grappling hook out in the future. Mm-hmm. And, you said it should have been obvious, but it's not obvious when you're young. It's like you're in a pinball machine. You're just bouncing off the bumpers and trying to figure out your way. And I wanted to be a writer so bad, I started asking to be used as an instrument of peace. And then I kind of forgot about it. And then around 35, I started asking again. And then boom, I link up with Joe Dispenza and all these other people. And, I say when you are in that alignment, it's like you become the boring machine, like that tunnels through, and matter conforms to your will. And I think that's the hardest jumping off point. I mean, if I had to distill my work into two pillars, it's surrender and trust, because that's what I'm trying to master in this life, especially being an artist and a writer. And, when I think about this path, I'm like, I love writing. I love what I do, but it's a very hard path. And as you were speaking, I was thinking that, I don't know, this could go two ways, but, the path of the soul is not necessarily an easy one because you are working on your spiritual growth and evolution. But at the same time, I see that look on your face. when you are in alignment, everything kind of unfolds, right? What do you think about that?
Yeah. Okay. So you said a bunch in there that I want to unpack. Number one, you cheated my third step for connecting with your intuition, which is trust and surrender. So I wanted to get that out there because it was so cool that that was your next point. Because intuition is always an act of surrender. We have to let go to know.
Can I pause you for 1 second and ask you a question about surrender?
Yeah.
You know, it's usually only military people, but when I say surrender and trust, they're like, no, not surrender. And I don't think they get that. So what does surrender mean to you?
Yeah. Well, from an egoic perspective, we feel surrender means I'm giving up, I'm giving in to somebody else. And that's not what we're talking about at all. Though, there are times too when that's a good idea as well, but it's not about, but again, the ego sometimes doesn't want to step down. It doesn't want to cede control, but, your ego is a beautiful thing. It's your human personality, self-conditioned awareness. I love having one. It lets me have this human experience, which I am very grateful for. And I signed up for, and having a sense of self is part of the deal. I just try not to lead with it anymore. I let it be there, I let it inform me. But I take my inspiration, calling, and wisdom from a higher place. And so kind of surrender is kind of like that. It's just around sort of giving control to that higher aspect of yourself and then letting that human aspect of yourself work in cooperation with that. It doesn't mean you give up. It doesn't mean you don't have intentions. It doesn't mean you don't have desires. I personally, I think this is actually a misunderstanding of Buddhism, not actually what Buddha was, intending. But, there's this talk about give up desire and you'll be happy. Well, give up desire. You won't have any resistance to anything, but A, you can't really do that because you're human.
Yeah.
And B, our desires are that's how we parse through this human reality. And that's how we expand the universe. So I love having desires. But I just have a looser relationship with them. And I think the biggest thing about spiritual surrender is you let go of needing to control and micromanage all aspects of your life, which is an illusion. Your mind is just running around like a chicken with its head cut off, thinking if I'm busy enough and I do all of these things, good stuff will happen. 9 out of 10 times, it's just a distraction, and all the goodness is happening when you're quiet and still and you align with what you really want. And then boom, it arrives. But the mind will take credit for that and say, look at all this doing that created that. And so it's really more ideal when our doing becomes aligned with our being, with our higher self. When, I use the difference between kind of like aligned action, right? Those things where you're just like, I have an idea. I'm going to do that. And then boom, 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 right? I am intuiting now that you've had that in your writing. Like you have an inspiration, boom, 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 you do it, it's done, right? And again, sometimes we have to, sometimes it's not one and done in one shot. Sometimes you have to kind of go back and wait for the inspiration to come again. And then you write. But, just like as a writer, I'm sure that you are used to having to work with that aspect of letting go, right? Of waiting for the inspiration
100%.
to come and learning again how to work with it. It's not that you do nothing, but there's that act of letting go, that act of surrender that opens us up to something bigger than ourselves. And that's what I'm talking about. It's not giving up. It's just letting go of all that false illusion of control that makes your ego happy and you've been taught that you need to do. So it makes you feel safe, but it's just distraction. And sometimes it's taking you away from what you want. It's actually taking you away from what you want because your ego actually does not know the fastest path to get what you want, but your soul always knows.
Yeah. Well, if there's one place that I think I've mastered trust in my life, it's in my writing. Yeah. And I don't really get writer's block anymore. I just, I follow where the story takes me and I'm always like super surprised. And I'm like, oh my God, this is so much better than, my human mind could have come up with. And when you were speaking, I was reflecting on, part of the purpose of this life is embodiment of all this experience and wisdom. And I mean, intuition really, would you say it's a physical experience? I mean, there is the mental aspect, but like we feel these things. I mean, the body is the vehicle of consciousness. So, we feel these. What do you think about that?
For many people, it's a felt sense.
Yeah.
And I think that's the strongest one for most people, and it's a great place to start. But I think of intuition as so many different things. I think of it as our spiritual guidance system, like our spiritual GPS.
Yep.
And I think it's can be an internal experience. I also think of personally, and again, it's just the words that you use, but I also think of intuition as, the external world nudging and guiding you as well. So it's just that constant tuning in and letting life inform you, whether it's a felt sense, whether it's a synchronicity or a sign, whether it's something in your life falling away so something else can arrive. And it's just about trusting in yourself, trusting in life, and listening, that deep listening, be it feeling into your body, listening to that wise voice in your head. It's just about, because it's really different for everybody. People receive it in so many different ways. I was on somebody's podcast, or no, I think she was on mine, but she was a human design person. And,
oh, cool.
it took me a long time to find one I wanted to interview, but
I want to interview one too.
Yeah, I'll give you her name. She was amazing.
Awesome.
But she was saying that, her human design, she doesn't really tap into the felt sense. She's like, that's, everybody else talks about that, but like, that's just not how I receive my information. So it's really unique for everyone. Like she gets it more from hearing it or seeing it. I can't remember.
Yeah.
I'm big on the felt sense. I feel everything.
Yeah.
But there really are just a range of ways to receive it. And again, I feel that, the outside world is also a reflection of my inside experience. So I pay attention to that too. I use everything as grist for that intuitive mill. Yeah. And I want to say one more thing, Tim, if I can, because you were saying before about the spiritual path is a hard one. And I would like to lovingly call BS on that and
I accept that.
And say, first of all, what we focus on grows, as you know, as a Joe Dispenza guy. So why would we want to put that in our space? Like, you don't want to be doing that. Like, life can feel good. But look, the human journey is one that has a lot of contrast, right? We learn oftentimes up until now what we want, who we really are, how life should be by what it is not, right? Victoria Shaw, my personality here, learned about her own lovability by having parents that were, struggled to reflect that back to me when I was a child, right? But we take that because sometimes it provides a tremendous amount of momentum for us to fly and soar and move forward, right? But this idea that life has to be hard is a very human idea, the guides say. And I mean, that's what they're saying right now. It's a very human idea, and it's not necessary. First of all, you have this idea, right? That, how you interpret your experience really matters. And so, wherever we can find the light in whatever we're experiencing, and sometimes that's hard. We don't want to spiritually bypass. You want to be present with what you're experiencing. But if you can find the value in what's going on, or you can find like a little bit of gold in every experience, or trust that it's there if you can't find it, that's going to get you moving back into alignment. But the human life is going to have some contrast. And it's really more, they say, about how you deal with that than pronouncements about what's an easy path or what's a hard path. It can all be a joyous path. That's within you to decide. And in the meantime, as you're learning how to, align with more joy in your life and create a more joyful experience, it's really important too to recognize that sometimes, it's not going to be so joyful, because in the human realm, we find the joy by discovering and learning what the joy is not.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's part of the human experience, no matter what path you're on. But those of us who are on that spiritual path, have an opportunity to become more consciously creators of our own lives and our own joy. And, you kind of have this extra toolkit that you can use actually to bring more joy to your life. All right, sorry.
No, I mean, that's all great. And it's you're like the third person this week that reflected that back to me. My sister, friend. Yeah. My sister's like, just, you have this artist program that it's supposed to be hard and all this stuff. And one of my best friends, Dr. Tobias Muller-Bertram, who brought UCSD and Joe together, Joe Dispenza, I just had a conversation with him like 2 or 3 days ago. And I just moved to Denver, and it's a pretty big transition. And I've only been here for 3 weeks, and I was telling him all this stuff, and he's like, wow, sounds like things are, and I've been having a challenging time. He's like, that sounds like things are actually going really good for you. He's like, you need to start focusing on the good things, not the things that, have not shown up yet. And I think that's one of the biggest places where people get in trouble. We think it's about this physical reality, but this is a mental reality. So it is really, the mind it's at the end of the day, it's us versus our mind.
Yeah. And I wouldn't even say that, but kind of. It's learning how to use your mind as the tool it was intended to be, rather than being used by it.
Great differentiation.
Yeah. And it's there. It's like I said, I love having the ego. I love having a mind. I love being rooted in the 3D world. I love sometimes thinking I'm smart. I just don't hang all of, my eggs, or I'm such a metaphor mixer. I don't stick all my eggs in that basket anymore. I understand it's just a tool. And, Einstein had it right. He talked about that. He says, like, intuition is the good stuff. The mind is the tool, but we have gotten those backwards. Yeah. And so I let my mind be a tool of my higher knowing, and then it works great.
Yeah. Well, I'm certainly no master. I'm on the path, and my writing, is how I discover who I am. And then hopefully as an artist, it's a reflection, a mirror to other people. So I'm going to switch gears here a little bit and ask you this question. From your perspective, what is the soul really here to learn through multiple lifetimes?
That's a great question. And I'm going to, when you come on my show, I'm going to talk to you about writing a little bit, my friend, because I just received an entire book last year that answers that question. But unfortunately, I have to actually write it now.
That's the part.
I have like 200 pages of received storyline.
Wow.
Yeah. But anyway, back to the question. So learn it's an okay word. But it can sometimes, we think about lessons, we think about right or wrong, good or bad, like, a bar that you have to cross over. And so maybe a better word is explore, discover. That's more akin when I've been shown when your soul is like getting ready to hop into a human body. It's excited. It's excited. It's curious. It's like, yay, I get to do this thing. And learning kind of seems a little heavier than that, right? For a lot of us. And again, I also love learning. I have 3 advanced degrees and, so it is just, they're just words. It depends how you, see them. But sometimes we feel like there are lessons that we have to like pass or fail. And the guys have told me again and again, it's not like that at all. It's not like that at all. This is just an exploration. And though you may have intentions that you set, things that you want to explore, ways in which you would love for your soul to grow, it's not a pass fail. It's not a pass fail. It's just a journey and an exploration. But I think that some of the things that we're here to rediscover and learn and grow in this world as it is now are our own lovability. Our own personal agency, our alignment with our higher truth and our higher selves, right? A big one for me on this journey is learning to trust in myself and trust in my own authority and my own power. I was one of those people that came in, and if they said it, they must be right, and a lot of times something in me knew they weren't speaking my truth. But I learned to quiet my truth more and more until it got so loud. I was like, forget it. I'm going for it, So that's been a big one for me, that self-trust. And, I often talk about my intuition journey, and I really believe that what's gotten better over the years that I've been doing this work is I just trust in it and in my higher self more and more and more. So, it's very unique. When I read into people often come to me for readings. They want to know their purpose. They want to know why they're here, what they're, oftentimes we think purpose is what you're supposed to do. Doing may be aligned with your purpose, but it's not your purpose itself. But our soul has an intention before we come here. Maybe a dominant one, but maybe some sub-intentions too. Through the law of attraction, if y'all have heard of that, we pull in all of the critical components that are going to help us experience and explore that. And then we hop in and our free will takes over and we have fun.
Let me ask you this. For somebody who has a challenging life and they say things like, I just wonder what I did to deserve this. What would you tell them?
I love that question. Nothing, 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 and just I love you. That's what I would say.
Yeah.
I love you, human, and I know that's hard. First of all, a challenging life oftentimes is our mind telling us this is worse than somebody else has, right? Which is a mind-made illusion. You have no idea what someone else's experience is, and comparison is a trap in that respect. So, if they were open to it, I might help them with some of that. But we all have challenges in life. And it is true that some people have some really wham doozy, like crazy challenges. And then I invite people, first of all, we got to soothe ourselves through it. We have to acknowledge that being human can be hard sometimes and uncomfortable, and sit with that and be present with that and allow that for sure. And then, it gets really, really delicious and delightful when we start to find the gains in those experiences. And there are always gains. There are always gains. And again, it's that phrase, this is happening for you or with you, not to you. Yeah. It's really true. Again, your soul, and that's really who you really are, in some way invited this in for a purpose. It invited this in for a purpose. And it's not something that your human mind can understand necessarily, but you can discover it through that human lens. And so we can start to make meaning of our suffering. And that usually helps us, find our way through. And, in this world of contrast too, a lot of times these things can be helpful. It's different for every person, but, sometimes like say a developmental disability I see, because I work with a lot of, kids and families of kids like on the autistic spectrum and with learning disabilities like I had and ADHD like I had. So I'm familiar with all of these things. Sometimes these things, like for me, my learning differences and my ADHD is probably why I'm such a great channeler. Yeah. Right? Because my left brain didn't work quite right. So I had to develop other ways to get the job done. And those have become my greatest gifts. Right? So a lot of times it's just how we look at it, and sometimes like a life losing a job, or I have a client that had a mental health breakdown and her guides are saying, look, this is it's cleaning the slate for you. It's clearing the slate because you're now ready to get on a different train than the one that you are on and go for it. Right. And so, and I don't know if that particular person is there right now with that understanding, but yeah, everything in our life is offering us something, even the hard stuff. There's no mistakes. There's nothing wrong, even when there is. And it's just learning to align with that more and more so we can find our way through.
Yeah. I, in addition to probably having 60 journals of my life on paper or something, I started in October 2010 keeping a gratitude and intention journal.
Love it.
And I write down 5 things I'm grateful for and 5 things I want to create every day. And we were talking about, the law of attraction. And I had this girlfriend in Mexico who she was like, oh, that's cute what you do. And maybe she even used wishful thinking or something. And I'm like, but I wrote it down and it happened. Do you not see there's a correlation here. So how do you explain that through the lens of consciousness and psychology?
Okay. First of all, I never try to convince anyone of anything. I trust people will find their truth in their very own way. I make suggestions, I plant seeds, and if that was a guy, for me, he wouldn't be in my life long, just because it wouldn't be fun to play with that person, Yeah. I want people that see the world the way I see the world, at least, well, I mean, they're not exactly the way I see the world, but I want people to play with that are as excited about these things as I am.
Yeah.
Okay. How does this relate to consciousness and psychology? I'm probably not the best person to ask about that. I don't have, even though I went to Princeton and I was called a scientist. I don't really have a scientist's mind. That's probably why I left academia. I have, scientists think very reductionistically, and I'm a very holistic thinker.
Yeah.
So I just follow what makes sense. And, it just makes more sense to me. It lines up. It makes my life feel better. It works. But we can, you could unpack all this from the psychology lens. And I've been told I was married to a physicist for 30 years. I still don't understand what the hell he did, but
Yeah.
he was really good at it. But
Theorized about
I
atoms
hear
and
that, yeah, he switched out of physics when I switched out of psychology, but nonetheless, he started there. But I hear quantum physics and stuff like that explains all of this.
Yeah.
So you can probably speak better to that than I can. I believe it. I just follow it because it feels right. It works. It made my life better. 15, 20 years, probably like 20 years ago when I was starting on this journey and I was sitting in my office in my home in Fairfield in Westport, Connecticut. And I was, talking to my spirit guides and I was thinking, geez, sweetie, you are a Ivy League trained psychologist. Maybe this is like crazy and you are losing your mind. And for me, what I realized at that moment was if I'm going for this because my life is getting better. And whatever improves my life is the right path to take.
Yeah. I mean, I think you really distilled it into 4 words there. It just feels right.
Yeah.
That's what you have to follow. And sometimes feeling right does not align with the mind. Like, no, I should be doing this.
Yeah.
And that is the hardest part, I think, for people to assimilate, including myself. I feel like I'm, getting better and better at it, but it's a hard thing to assimilate that connection between intuition and the intellect.
Yeah. And we're taught not to trust it. We're taught that it's going to lead us astray. We're taught that that's just wishful thinking. That's just right. Like that, so we're taught not to trust it. But when we redevelop that trust, then we see that it will never, ever steer you wrong. You may not always hear it right. Or sometimes our intuition takes us somewhere where, we initially don't want to go, but it's the right path, right? I didn't want to leave the marriage that I was in for 30 years. I loved that guy. I still love that guy. But my intuition kept saying, you've come to the end of this journey. And I listen, I follow it. And I think it was the right choice. So, but I had to listen for a while before I took the steps. Right. Yeah. And so again, it won't always tell us what we want to hear, but it will always take us to a better place. It's the best guidance you have.
When you are working with people, do you see a lot of patterns carrying over through lifetimes?
Yes. I will see, first of all, there's no time, so it's all happening at once, but that's a conversation for another day, but my mind can go there very easily. And so when we make a shift or a change in perspective in this lifetime, all of the other lives that are connected to us in that moment and that energy will shift as well. But absolutely. And I will get past lives for people, receive past lives for people all the time. And the way that it's been explained to me and the way that I see it is that we're just looking at the same thing from different angles, in different perspectives. And again, it's happening all at once, but it's okay if you want to think of it linearly because that's the way our minds work. And, that might be enough for you right now. But yeah, we do have these patterns. Again, I don't necessarily think is that you have to there's a problem that you have to solve so much, but it's more just like different angles in which we want to explore different experiences, because when we get it from enough different angles and understand it in enough different ways, we have profound shifts and growths, both personally, but also collectively and universally.
Yeah. If you could distill your work into one truth about the nature of intuition, I know these are hard questions, but just whatever comes through. What would the truth about intuition be? You probably already said it. But
what's coming through right now is trust yourself.
Yeah.
And trust it.
That is the challenge. I don't want to use that word again. Maybe that's
it's okay. It is. It can
growth.
be. It can be. Yeah. And it's just baby steps, a little bit at a time, And, also know that your intuition is guiding you, even if you're going like that. Okay. It's guiding you all the time. And again, everything really good that's happened in your life has been guided to you, brought to you, attracted to you in a co-cooperation between your higher self, your intuition. So it's there. It's always working for you. Even if you're not ready to follow it or listen to it yet, you might be making a lot of smoke and mirrors, a lot of noise. You might be sometimes in resistance and slowing things down that could come to you more quickly, but it's always there. It's always guiding you. It's never going to go away.
Yeah.
And it's just about learning to listen and trust it a little bit more every day. That's all you got to do.
Yeah. I mean, the challenge for me is I remember when I was probably in my like late 20s, early 30s, I was going to a lot of therapists, and like two of them said the same thing. They're like, you live up here in your mind. You have to be in your body. And then my mind is kind of like, well, what does he mean by that? I mean, I didn't figure it out until I started meditating,
Right.
a decade later or something like that. But where was I going with that? It was a good one. We'll get back to it. What are some of the daily practices that you use to stay connected and enhance your intuition?
I live a very intuitively guided life as much as I can. And I have a lot of freedom in my life too now. So it makes it super easy for me to kind of just do what I want to do. So yeah, it's everything. But the things that really help me stay connected to my truth and to my highest self, I spend a lot of time in nature. That's a big one for me. Being
Me
near
too.
water, being in nature just instantly, connects me. I'm really gentle and and nurturing of myself. I've really learned to develop a loving relationship with myself and be as kind and nurturing as possible. And that really helps. It also just helps me feel really good. I take really good care of myself. I'm a somewhat introverted person, even though I talk to people for a living. So, I've gotten really good at setting boundaries around that, making sure I have a fair amount of alone time, because that's where I really recharge and tune into myself and hear my guidance. And so I do a lot of that. Yeah. And, I know when to let go, when to be quiet, and when to like deeply listen. I also have support of my own. So I have a mentor that I work with. I've always had someone in my life. I'm someone that really likes to bounce ideas off of people. So I have my person. And I know I'm the person for other people too. And it's nice to be that, because sometimes it's hard to hear when you're in your own head and you're in your own life, because we do have these egoic defenses, or we do have like these patterns or ways of looking at things. And so I'm so blessed to have people in my life that can sometimes, see what I can't see. And then in the moment they say it, you're like, oh, I know. And it's also a blessing that I get to be that for so many other people, where I can hear their higher guidance and I can hear their intuition with them. And then as it comes through my lips, they're like, oh yeah, now I get it. Now I hear it. That makes sense. And it's an honor and a gift to be able to do that work.
Yeah. I remember where I was going with that before about like the
Okay.
intellects. I'm fairly intellectual, and and I understand the programs that are kind of keeping me from some of the things that perhaps I desire, which we could say desire is just the yearning for a human experience, but that's a whole other, that was going back to our other conversation. But it's like those programs, programs from childhood and that conditioning, they're so strong.
Yeah.
Even when you understand them intellectually, because they still live in the cells. So
I got an answer for you. This is personal, but it's also general. So I hope it's okay. Don't judge them. Stop judging them. That's the message for you. Stop judging them. They're part of the human experience. It's part of what you came here for. And also as a child, like these, that's what you were designed to do.
Yeah.
Right? It's part of the experience. So stop judging them. That's for you. And maybe for some other people out there too. And then you learn to love them and you learn to live with them. And then as you make peace with that, and actually it's a great discovery when you see, oh my God, like the reason this is happening is because that time when my mom said that to me when I was like 2, or whatever. Like it's so exciting to make those discoveries. Don't define yourself by those patterns too, because they can shift, they can change. So sometimes this happens a lot in therapy. We learn these things and then we tell ourselves a new story. I'm the person that trauma happened to when I was 4, and now forever I'll be like this. No.
Yeah.
That's not the point. The point is just understanding a little bit how life works and re-empowering yourself to understand that's not ever been who I really am. These are just patterns. They're just playing. And so, when they come up for me, I usually just wave and be like, hey, sweetie.
Yeah.
Like, it's so good, so good to see that you're still there.
Thanks for stopping by and reminding what I need to know.
Yeah. And I want to share an experience I had not so long ago I was looping on an issue that still kind of plagues me in this lifetime, even though I feel like I should be over it by now, right? One of those, it's been there with me as long as I can remember. And, made a lot of progress, but I was looping about it and I was getting so annoyed with myself. I'm like, come on, sweetheart, you should be over this by now. This is ridiculous, which is not the right direction to go, by the way. But, humans be humans. And all of a sudden I just had this huge revelation. I saw things like my soul saw it for a minute and I was like, oh my God, I get to be here. I get to be in this human body, thinking that this thing that's looping in my mind is a big freaking deal. This is incredible. Look what I get to do. I get to be in this world where these things can happen. And, and it was one of the most freeing moments I had in my life, I was just like, oh yeah, because that's what your soul is experiencing. This is just playtime. And so, when we can kind of hold those things and just recognize this is an honor and a gift to be here and get to grapple with these crazy, silly things that, your soul just thinks you're adorable. Your soul just thinks you're adorable. And so see yourself that way too, and just honor it and don't take it so seriously because, this is just one of the toys in the playroom. Yeah.
I like that. Going back to the practices thing, does prayer play a role in your practices?
Personally, prayer, nah, not so much. I wouldn't really see it. Not that I'm against it, but I wouldn't really see it that way. I do a lot of intention setting. In fact, I'm going to steal your 5 intentions a day. That sounds really fun.
Yeah, it is.
I always do before I go to bed every night. I run my greatest hits. So I kind of just think of what are the things that happened today that were so awesome. So that's I'm going to
steal that. That's great.
That's sort of my daily practice, cause oftentimes people reflect on, this, all the negativity. And I just started running the greatest hits. I look forward to it every night before I go to bed to do my greatest hits tape. And then, in the morning, I usually just receive a word to set the energy of the day. But I like the intentions, and I even like the intentions before going to bed. I would say in doing that as a practice, because I'm very kinesthetic and very in touch with my felt sense, I always try to, if I'm trying to manifest something, but if I'm wanting to manifest something or align with something, I often tune in and see how resonant it feels with me. If something thinking about something is making me feel worse, then I let it go because I know I'm not aligned with that right now. And I'll wait till I loop back. My favorite thing that I do a lot of times in the evening when I'm unwinding and watching TV is, I have all sorts of weird little ways to pass the time, but I play this game, Bananagrams.
Oh yeah, I played that.
Okay, it's like a word tile game. And I used to do it with just positive words because it just was a good way of bringing the left brain and the right brain together and just soothing my nervous system. But now I sometimes use it for manifestation too. It's just a fun game. I'd like this to happen. And then I kind of fill in words around, I pick the focal words and I fill in words around it. And I was doing that the other night with something that I wanted to accomplish and or have bring into my life. And a lot of insecurity was coming up. So I left it. I just I'm not going to do this anymore. I did something else, and then 2 days later I came back. My energy felt more aligned. I finished it. It was in the flow. And so it's really important to know. And that's the difference between wishful thinking and kind of manifestation and intention setting is wishful thinking is trying to force a reality on the world or trying to, I talk about Febrezing it. Let me just spray this really stinky smelling stuff that makes me not realize that I'm in a moldy, damp, disgusting warehouse. Don't do that. Be where you are, be present. And then in that warehouse, you find what smells good. And that's how you get out. Right. So wishful thinking is sort of like Febrezing it. Whereas when we're talking about intentions and the law of attraction, it's about allowing ourselves to be where we are with no judgment and then finding our way through that. And it's a completely different thing. And one is a lot more loving of ourselves and our experience.
I'm going to put a Post-it note next to my bed that says greatest hits.
Okay.
Because I think that is a really powerful practice. And, it's just part of my morning routine with my coffee to do the gratitude intention journal. But it's probably also really good to do at night because you are, setting this, dropping these stones in the subconscious mind, which is a great thing. I'm sure a lot of people, like last night, I don't know what I was kind of spinning about before bed, but it's like, oh, what if I replace that spin cycle with all the amazing things that happened today?
Yeah. And I used to do, I haven't really needed to do it recently, but especially like pre-divorce and pre-moving to color, there was like a lot percolating in my mind and a lot of stress for a bunch of years. And what I got in the habit of doing, this was given to me by a teacher, but it's phenomenal, is every night I would do a brain dump and I would write all the things that I was stressed about down. I would ask for them to be taken away. I'd promise to come back to them and look at them again later, at another time, but to free myself. And I did that, every night for months and months and months. I'd usually revisit it when I went to dump more. Because they weren't really things that I could do anything about. They were just things that were bothering me, but they were in development. But that was also another way of just, you give attention to these things. You thank them. You promise, you're going to deal with them. You can even assign some to your guides because you might wake up in the morning and some of them might be solved. Because again, it's not about forcing your mind into will, forcing your mind to be with your will. Again, that's wishful thinking. That's for breezing it. That's not going to get you anywhere. It's really about honoring that all aspects of that human experience and then deciding what would I like to focus on instead. And sometimes before we can focus on instead, we have to, give a little bit of attention and love to the places that are hurting.
Yeah. Let me leave you with one final question here.
Okay.
If you could give listeners one simple way to strengthen their connection to their own higher guidance today, what would it be?
Listen, and trust. Yeah. I mean, I think there's been a lot of tools in this conversation today that'll kind of get you started. And of course I teach about this, so you can check out my podcast and my stuff too, but really it's just listen, trust, and set that intention. That's all you got to do. It will flow and then all the right opportunities will line up for you, and you're doing it already. And a lot of you that are listening know you're doing it already. And just from having listened to this, I know that you're thinking about all the ways that you're doing it already, and you already are like 10 steps ahead and trusting it more.
Excellent. Check out her podcast, Intuitive Connection. The name pretty much says what it's about. So, if you want to explore this deeper, check out her podcast. Thank you so much for sharing all your wisdom today. It was so fun. I feel like we barely scratched the surface. We could probably talk for hours about this.
It's really fun.
Where can people find you?
You can find me at Victoria Shaw, SHAW, intuitive.com. So my website is victoriashawintuitive.com. The podcast is on all the platforms. I'm also in season 2 of a TV show, Living in Alignment, which is on Soul Search TV, but also on my website. And that one, the Soul Search app streams to like Amazon and Roku and all those, and Apple and all those fun places. But you can find everything about me on my website, again, which is victoriashawintuitive.com.
Awesome. I'm going to check out your show.
Thanks. Please do.
Yeah. Thanks, folks, for listening. Please, The Real Tim Shields. Actually, I have a new website, therealtimshields.com. I kind of updated that, and that's all my socials, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. Please like and follow. It would really help my publishers and things that I'm dealing with right now. But this was super fun. Another episode of The Inciting Incident with Dr. Victoria Shaw. Until next time.